everyone. Good afternoon. After Rohin, right? I got the name right. It's a challenge to match up to those standards, but we are here. So a little bit about me. I'm Deepshikha. I've been part of the HR fraternity for 18 plus years. Worked across Walmart, Zara, Shree Cement, and now completing the trilogy with Roti Kapda Makan trilogy with Bikaji Foods. And I'm here to discuss leadership transformation, building a pipeline, innovation, and human connection. That's quite a big ask. With me is a very esteemed panel. I have to keep this paper here. See, I've done my homework. So I have with me Mr. Amit Sharma, CHRO Gokaldas Exports Limited. We have Mr. A. Venugopal, Chief People Officer for Wrogn Private Limited. Ms. Roopashri, VY, VP and Head of Learning Development, Broadridge. Dr. Nilanjana Bhaduri, Senior Director, HR Cyient Limited. And Mrs. Chhavi Bajaj, Senior Vice President and Head Talent and Organization, Siemens. So thank you all of you for being here, and thank you all of you for being a great audience till now. And I hope we are able to live up to your expectations. Learning, and as we have been talking about that how the world is changing, how the organizations, the environment that we are working in is changing. We have seen floppy disks to AI now. And one thing that remains constant for all of us is how fast we learn in this. And therefore, I'll not waste much of your time, and I'll start with the first question. So the first part of building a leadership pipeline or identifying building development plans is how to identify the high potential. So my first question is potential very specific to an industry, a context, or is it agnostic across? Are we looking for universal traits across organizations, across industries? Venu, would you want to answer this?
What is potential and is it industry specific, is it industry agnostic? That's what we are trying to look at. Now, by my understanding, the potential is something which continues to remain a little unmeasurable till the time we don't really get down to the brass tacks of it. So, ability to do something consistently over a period of time indicates my technical ability, a technical potential that I have on the role. But to be able to rise to a leadership layer, I need to look at, okay, is this person, has to be technically capable in some part of the role that we need, but we'll also have to look at whether they align with the values of the organization, whether they align with the direction the organization is taking. Over a period of time, there have been various ways that the organizations have worked to really sort of measure potential. Back in the good old days, it was something called a CR, a confidential report, which still exists in some government organizations. It has evolved into a 9-blocker. It evolved beyond that, where organizations said ratings mean nothing. We'll move away from there. And today it is a lot about assessment centers. It is a lot about psychometric tests. It is a lot about figuring out what are the behavioral traits that bring potential into play. It certainly is organization specific. It certainly is industry specific in some sense. For example, if I wish to play cricket, I need to know cricket. And I may be a good volleyball player, but can I take a leadership role in cricket? Depends whether my basics on cricket is good or not. And then beyond that, proceed to the behavioral aspects of, can I be a leader? Yes, there my technical skill may not match it so much.
Great. So we have functional capability and behavioral. Amit wants to add.
I have a bit of a different opinion, and this is just thought I'll just kind of share it so that audience have both the perspectives. To me, the potential is something completely industry agnostic. And one of the examples you can see, a lot of people sitting on this panel here have moved industries and they are where they are. One of the key aspects, I look at potential from two aspects simply. Number one, do you really have the agility to make it, to the next level in terms of your learning agility, in terms of your attitude, in terms of your ability to take on different aspects, different experiences, flex it out across different scenarios. So that's an important aspect about your internal agility to make things happen. Second important piece is also about, do you really even have aspiration? many times there are people who are great, but they just don't have aspiration to grow further up. They are quite contented in their life. They say, this is what it is. Beyond that, I don't want to do anything much. I'm happy doing what I'm doing. They may be great from one aspect of potential standpoint, but since they don't have an aspiration to really grow, I would really not call them as a high potential. So for me, both things are equally important. The agility which a person needs to have and the aspiration to make it big. When that combination happens, you call it a high potential. But in my mind, it is some skills can be specific to an industry, but largely that definition would remain an industry agnostic piece, Deepshikha.
Thank you. Thank you. Roopashri also wants to add.
So before I go to the question itself, I want to call out Broadridge. I belong to Broadridge, and Broadridge is a fintech leader and going through a transformation right now. So when we talk about transformation and specifically keeping leaders in mind, of course we are doing 9 block, what we spoke about, plotting people into performance and potential lens. But on top of it, we are also layering it, is leader having a trait of a BAU, that is, they are mastering the operational excellency at this point, the focus is there, or they are also displaying the grow traits. That is, are they picking up and improving or bringing innovation to the table? And third is, are they bringing the transform traits? That is, are they anticipating future and building solutions for the future? So we are looking leaders from this lens also. So 9 box we are doing quarterly, and now layering this BAU and grow transform lens, and we intend to do it every 6 months, so that we have and stock of where each leader is, and thereon then give them crucibles to develop on where the gap is. So I'll pause there because I definitely wanted to share what are the development plans.
So just summarizing what we spoke about functional capability and operational excellence, behavioral capability, behavioral traits, agility, which was transforming ability to transform ourselves, and aspirational, which is the grow framework, which also Roopashri spoke about. So as we talk about high potentials in our organization, there are multiple types of people, and there'll be a group of people who will be called high potentials. So how do you manage communication with the seeing that potential is a moving target, and today's high potential may or may not continue to be one also. There's another team member who aspires to be in that group. So how do you manage that communication? Nilanjana, would you want to answer that?
So my point here would be that, this entire piece, and I'm going to stay on that conversation a little bit, emotions stick very high on that. So it's this leadership role, positioning, everything is something about, our lens of looking at it has been how we have seen it when we've entered the workforce. But if we look at the current generation at work, the way they perceive things is going to be very different from what we have been looking at it. So when you have a high potential, it's important that we communicate that very clearly, and we say that this is the position that you are supposed to be doing for the next 1 year, 2 years. Even the nature of the work has changed, right? So there are 3 things that we are looking at: the kind of people, the nature of work, and what's happening around them, right? So the environment is also coming into the picture, where they also have different things, different experiments that they are running and stuff like that, that peer influence, which might also be pulling them away. And when you're putting them into that pedestal of being a high potential character, then they have certain responsibilities that they need to execute, which would be very different from how they would be executing it otherwise, right? So that's a very clear communication that I would put in place.
Thank you. Chhavi, would you want to add?
Yeah, I think I'd just like to add to the fact that we're talking about, I think, 2 very, very, deep concepts here. I think when you're talking about potential first, I think my question always has been potential for what? And I think starting from the keynote that we heard, I think the way we are moving across industry is on role-based potential, right? Potential for what? You just can't, you can be creating a lake, as future potential leaders, but somewhere it has to flow into a river, going into which seeds is going, right? So that sharpness about what are the roles we are building potential for needs to be clear. And I think also responding, I think Nilanjana to you is that I think it's also about operating in context. So when I worked in a product company versus an e-commerce company, and now in an automotive sector, the way the organization culture exists and the way it needs to be will define, right, how you communicate whether a person is high potential or not. So I don't think there is one way of doing it. Yes, there is a pedestal that you put person on, and there is a burden of being a high potential as well, right? And so many leaders I have seen feeling burnt out because of they have been put on a pedestal and are always in the spotlight. I think the easy answer for me is that everybody is a potential to start with, right? But to be able to give individuals the access to understand what do I build the potential for? And Amit, to your point, do I even have the aspiration? Am I okay with the potential I have right now? I think labeling somebody is usually a disservice if you're not correlating it to an outcome.
Okay, thank you. So we have two views here, really interesting. One is where you actually tell the person that, okay, you are great, you're doing well, and we are betting on you. And the second is we are identifying potential for what. So we are saying potential is an aspiration. We define that this is potential, and we keep it open. We rather not put the person on a pedestal and not put him or her on a spotlight, because that might burn the person out. Now here we can take the question potential for what is what I take from this discussion, that when we identify, Venu, do you want to add something here? Yeah.
I mean, I will just allude to what she said. That's why, I mean, it is important to put it in context. When we are talking about potential, potential has to be in context. Yes, it is fungible across. It could be that, okay, you have a potential to be a leader in any field for that matter.
Sure.
But when you start building out a strategy towards building a pipeline, and looking at potential of people, yes, it has to be directed towards what we are trying to build on towards. That's, I think I like that.
So we'll leave you with one question, potential for what, and identify your context, what works for you.
Just to further say
sure.
that, Deepshikha, on this is an interesting point, which both Chhavi as well as Venu have talked about. See, this other way to look at it is that what's the point of calling somebody a potential if you're not even communicating to the person that you are there? It's like, I love you, but I won't tell you I love you. Now, what's the point of that relationship? You need to be clear. Now, how you communicate it is the more important point around this. Are you really making a hero out of it in front of the entire organization, and then putting the person on such a high pressure that that the person burns out, as Chhavi just talked about, or it's more a communication to the person saying, okay, this is what we are really looking up to you. You are the person who can go up, 2 levels up, 3 levels up. This is the kind of a roadmap we'll be looking at you. And then this is how we are supporting you in this entire journey. Now that's where the mode of communication is more critical around it, in my view. How do you really manage that communication? Don't make it a hero out of it, because then suddenly you start creating classes in the organization. You have haves versus have-nots, or, and that's something which again, demotivates the larger organization, because you'll always have a handful of people who will be there and everybody says, okay, Thika, you are the high potential, you do it. Now, why are everyone asking me to do this stuff? So it's important to kind of manage that communication with the person at least, with all the support. But yeah, putting them on a pedestal and kind of burning them out would actually, in my view, would be counterproductive.
Roopashri wants to
I
add.
just wanted to add, building on what every panel said, right? It is not this side or that side, the extreme stand we take on this. But what we have also experimented is having an ongoing conversation with anybody and everybody, because we are doing, like I said, the 9-box assessing performance and potential for everybody in the organization. And second is giving them opportunities, and that is keeping the opportunities open and having people sign up for it. And one example is we have something called Shadow Cabinet. It is mimicked or borrowed from UK government, and how they do it is slightly different, and we have modified it. There, I think previous government is consulted and best practices passed. What we have done is our India leadership team, instead of everything coming to their table, be it policy or practice, we have invited a shadow cabinet members, which are coming from next layer, and they get to first address what is in front of them as a policy or a practice, and find merit in it, and then bring the recommendation to the ILT, so that one, we save time for the ILT. Two, this is created as an opportunity for us to witness that is there potential in play, and where we can bet on or invest further on some people who played that role of a cabinet. So I'll pause
Thank
there.
you. That was a real good actionable. So from Amit, that we are, let's keep it discreet. However, we need to tell people and not be on the two extremes. And a very interesting example from Roopashri about creating a shadow management, a shadow cabinet, which you start giving them exposure to the kind of life that they might have going forward. So we move to the next question, again staying on the topic of high potentials here. All of these people, while all organizations have documented process policies, we have a lot of tacit knowledge that we develop, which is not written somewhere. It's with the person. How do you document that? How do you actually do that in your, Chhavi, would you want to take that?
I don't know, really. I think I work in an organization that's 175 years old.
Yeah.
I've also worked in an organization that was just 8 years old, and the approach is so very different. In my current organization, the access to people is so easy because people don't leave the organization. You've been around for 30, 35 years, and you join with the intent to retire from the organization, where it's a lot easier through your network, through your relationships, and now through technology aiding that. I think it is where the churn is higher, is where the challenge is more. And I don't know how organizations have really solved for it, except for the fact that, there is a huge mobility engine that works. I haven't seen an organization that, where the churn is high, people stay in jobs for very long, even when they move internally, and therefore the knowledge management is taken care of, because every new person who's coming into the job, takes, the identity of the job changes as well. So sometimes I feel there is no need in those organizations to actually do active knowledge management or transference, because the shape of the job changes with the person, and that is the beauty of it as well.
Interesting, quite interesting. So the shape of the job changes with the person gives their bit. Anyone of you, Amit, would you want to add something to it here?
This is the challenge which I would say most of the organizations are dealing with, and there is no silver bullet. I don't think so anybody has found out. To me, what what matters the most in this is how you are working in a more, interdisciplinary, collaborative manner. Because as you kind of start working, breaking those silos and start working in such teams, with the conversations, the knowledge gets transmitted. Because this is all tribal knowledge, which is not documented, and it's very hard to document also. A lot of it, this is somewhere there in the mind because of the experience, and it will only come through conversation. So if you are able to create those channels in the organization where your people are working collaboratively, and you are encouraging more and more conversations around it, a lot of it will come out of it. Job rotation helps, because then when people are kind of experienced in multiple areas, they would tend to kind of always look, ask the previous person, hey, what really happened there? Can you just help me out at it during that transition period? And it will work. It's easier to manage in organizations which have a history, especially which has long retention of people, which are vis-a-vis organizations which have a very high turnover. So it's also a factor of that. But honestly, there's no silver bullet around it on this topic.
So we have another task for us, that we need to start retaining people and start keeping them in our organization. So yeah.
On this topic, I agree with what you just said, right? Like when it comes to, especially for a company like how Chhavi mentioned, where 6 to 2-year-old company Broadridge is, and average tenure is 15 to 20. So all of the domain knowledge is in the heads of the people. So we are looking at cracking that thing, that how can we get what is in their head and democratize that content or learning to rest of the organization. That is one part. But I also want to add that one very good practice Broadridge has when it comes to passing the culture or cascading the culture, because propagating or making sure that every new joiner gets a similar experience. For that, we have something called Vision Leader. And it is a, believe me or not, and I was very impressed when I joined, it is a 35-year-old practice. And consistently they are doing it, and every year they pick a book. And what resonates from the book, the author, it starts with author sharing what is in the book, but then they divide that book into 8 chapters. And then every leader, starting with the CEO, is part of those discussions. And what best practices from the book we want to apply and then cascade it to the last mile is the journey. And we do for the entire year. There is, for the leaders, 24 hours of investment, and for the rest, easily 8 hours of investment. So that, I feel, helps keep the culture aspect intact.
Example I can share, having worked across 3 different kinds of organizations. a PSU, an MNC, and now an Indian organization, one thing which I found very easy to transition was in a PSU kind of a setup. The good part about what they do is everything is filed. So anything which is there, you have to make a note sheet and put it in the file. Anybody who comes in into that chair, you just open the files, you go through those file notings and everything, you'll get a lot of idea about what's really happening. In today's world, it seems like a very bureaucratic process, but I can tell you from a knowledge management standpoint, you still can't beat, those kind of file notings and kind of, transfer of knowledge. I remember I've looked at files which are like made 25 years old, earlier than when somebody was there in that role, to see how things have evolved, what things were there at the back end. Today, as people go, the entire kind of knowledge goes along with them, everything is in the laptop gets formatted, and generally you would have seen when you take over a role, you practically start from scratch. There is hardly much of a handover which is really happening in these times. So that's one thing which I've found PSUs do it really well.
We'll add an experience that we had during the Great Resignation phase to how do we cope with Great Resignation, because we had a lot of churn and this is service industry, so if the people walk out, we would be left absolutely nowhere. So we brought it into the talent management process right from the beginning, where we had, whoever's going to be, whoever has that knowledge frame in the organization would have a successor somewhere identified, and this person would also be somewhere shadowing, as what you would call it, knowing what's happening, what are those day-to-day conversations, customer connects, the hooks are known to these people. And it's also the high potential is not on that, pegged to that position, the next position. So that's the potential that you have to step into. That's kind of provided for them. And if it's not happening, say this other person is retained, that's where he or she gets diverted to some other platforms where their expertise is used. So that's the way the talent management process kind of keeps that accountability of who are these people and how they are, learning from the leader, the present leader, and also for moving the next leader, he or she has to show that I have groomed XYZ people under me. So it's kind of taken care by the talent management process extensively. So if I have not developed someone, I don't move up. I stay in my chair.
That's a great actionable insight. So we have from Roopashri and from Nilanjana insights that we can action upon. And it's very interesting that as we move across, we move forward, we need to somewhere treasure the skills that we learned, like example that Amit gave about PSUs, that how detailed documentation used to happen at those times, which we might have missed somewhere. So for knowledge transfer, maybe that is something that we could continue to build continuity in the process. We move on to mentorship as a topic, as a development topic, because it has been talked about that we spoke about shadow leadership. We spoke about, so mentoring is quite an impactful exercise in terms of development. People learn looking at people, and that's a basic skill that every child has. That the first thing that they do is that they observe and learn. So that's one thing which is a very powerful tool. How do we enable learning through mentorship? But there's a challenge, day-to-day challenge, that we need a lot of bandwidth for mentoring. So how do we enable that in our organizations? Venu, would you want to take that?
See, it is, if we look at the organizations that I work with, organizations like GE, Accenture, Deutsche Bank and all, they've kind of done a lot of work on this aspect, on being able to develop. Now, different organizations obviously have different approaches because of the nature of the business they are in. One way where it has really helped is, in addition to having a supervisor whom you are reporting to, who is probably observing your performance and kind of evaluating you on your performance day in, day out, please attach somebody. In some companies it's called a counselor, in some companies it's called a coach, in some companies it may be called a mentor, who observes you in your work across various projects. So it may be that I am handling at any point in time, maybe having 2 or 3 projects. My supervisor in project A would observe certain things about me, in project B would observe certain things about me, in project C would observe certain things about me. It is for my mentor or my counselor or my coach to be in touch with them, to be able to figure out what are the common threads in terms of what are what are the strengths that the person is displaying, and what are the areas that this person may need to really work on to be able to climb up the ladder next. And those then come out in the dialogues that we used to have across the mentor-mentee or the coach-coachee, as we would call it, to be able to figure, okay, while you are doing A, B, and C, what we see is that you have a potential for doing X, Y, Z, and therefore start asserting yourself on those strengths of yours. And in addition to that, these are some aspects which you may need to really work on to be able to make yourself better. So having somebody who can observe me from a distance like a fly on the wall, when I'm doing different aspects of my role or different jobs or different projects, and then tell me what are the common threads, that helps in helping me understand without fear as to what are the strengths, and therefore I take it from that person, because that person is not judging me, that person is not evaluating me, that person doesn't hold any strings to my growth or to my stagnation either which ways in the organization.
Thank you. Chhavi, would you want to add to that?
Yeah, again, not a very easy question to answer, because I think there is a classical way, to define mentoring, as a relationship between two people, right? Which is structured. It's not that anymore. Makes me uncomfortable as I say it, because that's the way I've learned it, right? But in communities of practice, especially whether it's in the tech space or any functional space, people are finding mentors at a peer level who are experts at certain things and learning from them a specific skill or a specific way of doing things, and it's that mentoring relationship as well. So I think my submission to this question would be, I think, make a mentor the way you want to be, right? It could be the way, you've described it very eloquently, a very structured way wherein a mentor knows your environment, knows your context, has feedback on you. You can call it a mentor or a coach. A lot of times these are interchangeable concepts also. How do you work through that? Or a mentor could be a person in a very different industry who can challenge you in your thinking, who can help you process what's going on in your industry and give you a very different perspective. So the question to start with any mentoring piece is that, like with potential, what are you using it for? And then you structure or anchor that mentoring construct based on that, right? I could find mentors amongst each one of you from what I'm learning from you.
Amit wants to add. Yep.
So most critical part in mentoring, which I have found in my experience, is the context, of the entire purpose. In what context you want the person to be mentored, and what's the purpose of the entire mentoring program, because that's what really defines how you really want to do that. Just to give you an example of how we did in one of my previous organizations, and that organization was more verticalized in various silos, though it was one company, but each business worked completely differently. One of the key problem areas which we were facing, that on one hand we were identifying high potential people across the organization. At the same time, nobody had a view which was more cross business, because all of them had generally moved within their businesses, and the cross movement of people within businesses was very limited. And as we identified that as a key barrier for us in terms of developing people, we identified, how do we really do the mentoring which is more cross-business, cross-functional, and that's how we started identifying it. So what are the key needs of our high potential people, and who would do that with somebody from a different business? So as Chhavi said, that on one hand it will be challenging, the person in terms of the thinking process, because each business works in a very different context, and what solution works in business A may not work in business B, and there are people who kind of think in a particular way. So it just helps you that. The second important piece is, what is that we are mentoring on, and there is somebody, an expert who's sitting there who's really helping build that competence. The key aspect of what we also realize is that the ownership of this entire process has to still lie with the mentee. If the mentee himself or herself is not keen on it, no matter what kind of a program you will put it, what kind of structure you will put it, you can have all your talent management people looking into it, things will just not move. And that is where I go back to my previous point around aspiration of the person. As much as, we need to identify high potentials, one of the key aspects have to be, does the person has really aspiration and the agility piece, to grow and to learn, and also to kind of, go to the next level. So these are the important aspects which we really need to, put it together. Structures help, But I can tell you, you can put any structures. If there is no chemistry between the two, things will not work. If there is no interest between the two, things will not work. So it's as much as a people process as it is a structured, a classical structured process in a textbook scenario.
So we have we definitely need to have structures, because sometimes people need to have doors and pathways to go through. So sure, Nilanjana wants
I
to
just
add.
wanted to add one thing here.
Sure.
Classically mentoring is understood as a responsibility that the mentor has to make time and spend, right? Your question originally was, with time, how do they people,
Yes.
what is the willingness? Classically mentoring has this element of responsibility added on. If I'm mentoring someone, I also need to find something which will help my mentee navigate in the organization. The moment we put that, the forthcomingness of the mentor steps away, because they find it as an additional burden, assigned to them, especially when it's cross-functional and all of these things brought in. People don't like it. So maybe a context setting for the mentors of what is expected of them will also help in augmenting these kind of programs. That's been my experience, at least.
Thank you. So thank you. That was a great insight. Roopashri wants to add. Yeah.
So I think building on what Amit said, right? So there is learning agility we talked about, and having that aspiration, I would like to add one more word, humility also, right? Like to be mentored, especially as a leader, we need to have that humility, and we have all heard about reverse mentoring and speed mentoring. Something we experimented, I wanted to share, like we do subscribe for GPTW. And there were leaders who scored certain number, and there were leaders who were below certain number, and we paired these people up. And we have seen, and of course somebody, I think you mentioned, we need to have that structure set, context set, and those meetings were handheld. And then we saw, fast forward 1 year, there was an improvement, and we said that you just learn from each other. We didn't say, this person is doing well or this person is not doing well, but we just left the forum for them to discuss the best practices. So that has worked very well for us.
Great. So we have points here. One is build a structure, of course. The second was a very interesting point where now we have mentors across. There's this concept in Google, Googler to Googler, where people can volunteer that I want to teach this, and even if one person is interested in that skill, they would be so. All that learning team has done is they have built a framework to make that happen, and now it organically happens across the organization, enabling a learning organization. So that is one thing that we could across all levels. And of course, one was that don't put that burden of wanting to develop. And then the accountability, learning agility, it remains on the person. In Hindi, there's this saying, कुआं प्यासा कुएं के पास जाता है, कुआं प्यासे के पास नहीं आता. So the well doesn't come to the person who is thirsty. So I think we summarize with that. The next we move to AI part of our that's a part of the topic. So technology, as we say that we are talking about frameworks, deploying technology. So how do you deploy technology in your organization? One. Second is, as we deploy technology, one of the biggest outputs of technology and the input, of course, is data. When we take we capture data, that's how we feed it into intelligence, and that becomes the intelligence that we can use for further developing our own technology and our own programs. So how do we do that in your organizations, and anything that you would want to
So one of the things that we constantly look for is the profiling that Rohin was earlier talking about. Who are the leaders, number of people that they are working with, what are the concepts that they are working on, how many people they have developed in these particular contexts of the domains and that they have been working on. So we try to bring in this information from the learner profiles. Also looking at number of courses that they have been doing. So in the internal system, we would have the basic, advanced, intermediate, all of these kind of courses. So whether they are actually learning or taking those courses, whether they have proactively stepped up and given seminars, because sometimes there are many people whom you would find attending conferences like these. Now, do I take back this learning to my team? How do I take it back? Whether those kind of things are happening or not are things that we document for these people, and we extract this information, and then we kind of have a dashboard of who are the real people that we can bank upon for taking the organization forward. That's how we've been using technology so far.
Chhavi, would you want to take that, the focus on technology?
I think part of it is, the answer is, I think some of it is non-negotiable, right? I think the way organizations, especially in scaled organizations, people need to interact, engage, collaborate, and generate output. You need technology, right? The other basic platform is that for me to easily do my work, right? Technology needs to be there. Whether it's from a payroll to a concierge services, the entire spectrum, right? But where it becomes a little interesting is when organizations decide to use employee data to influence how they think and operate. And I think there are enough organizations who are multinationals here where it's so restrictive that you really can't do that. But I think some organizations where I've worked in the past have with permission done that, and it has been a beautiful experience where we've used technology to nudge, for not just to act, but also to reflect, especially in leadership development journeys or in where a large transformation is happening, where there are specific key milestones that are embedded in that journey. How to use technology, firstly to interact, collaborate, engage, which is basic, but also to generate reflection. And this is where AI comes in beautifully in terms of mapping. Where are experts in the organization? How do you get people to access that network and nudge them? Can you ask this question too? And a new, 5 names pop up and things like that. In one such experience, there was an inclusion journey that we wanted the organization to be on. And the nudge was something very simple. Who did you have lunch with today? And to record it and put it on, the internal social platform. And that generated, surprisingly, over a period of 7-8 months, people suddenly wanting to do new jobs in the organization. A very unexpected turn of events. So you never know what. So I think what I think Rohan said very beautifully in the morning, experiment with technology. You never know, such surprising and beautiful outcomes might come up, some unintended outcomes. So I think that's where I think I would love to do more in my organization too.
One of the key aspects, on one hand, technology is a great enabler around everything, including learning. We have enough tools today in the, in the market or in the organization, which nudge you around. Okay, this is what you want to do. This is where your skill levels are. These are your required skills. Can you do these programs? This is available on this e-learning. This will take you so much time. If you have not done it, they will keep on nudging you, keep on, reminding you, and all of that stuff. That's a nice enabler around, in organizations through the technology. But the larger problem, which in my view exists, is why should somebody get nudged? What is the organization's learning culture, in terms of which will make people, learn by themselves rather than waiting for these nudges to really come in? Are we really, building that environment in the organization that people have enough time to learn, or they are always under the pressure of delivery and they just don't have time to even reflect upon what they need to do? Is learning really, is spending time on learning really appreciated in the organization? Are we really questioning the managers that if your teams are really learning new skills, are you really putting them onto new assignments or new areas so that you develop them? Are we also questioning people in terms of just at the year-end appraisal, are you only doing a KPI measurement about what was agreed versus what is done, or there are strong learning goals also which are equally there and equally valued in the performance management, as not that it's a nice thing to do at the end of it, which typically happens. The guy is great and the person has busted all the targets, but didn't have time to do the learning program, so what, how does it matter? He's still my top performer, high potential person. No, that's not the right conversation we need to have. So it's very important that we build the right culture, then the technology can be a good enabler to it. Otherwise, we'll do all of these fancy stuff. I don't think so it will really going to yield result.
Yes.
I think I'll allude to that, saying that don't adopt tech for the sake of adopting tech. Adopt tech for the sake of achieving what you are going out to achieve on your journey. Unless it is directed to a specific outcome, we could become a jumble of all the tools that we have adopted from the marketplace just because it is available. The first point that he had also said, and I think this alludes to that, is there has to be intent. Unless intent is there, any tech will not help. But if intent is there, then the tech will definitely come in, and even if the organization is not proactive in bringing it, these people who have the intent will force the organization to bring it into play. And I'm pretty sure that today's organizations are pretty progressive to be able to listen in, understand that the people are nudging them to adopt technology, and they will then adopt technology to be able to bring out the best in them.
Roopashri, you want to add?
So just building on what he said, right? Like intent and also outcome, business outcomes. So technology has to be coming in place to resulting into some business outcome. That's what we are holding space for, or we are encouraging and inspiring our audience to do, our associates to do. So we are in the front of all emerging technologies, the ABCDs we spoke about, be it AI, cloud, or blockchain and digital, right? So specifically AI, we are saying AI everything and anywhere. We do have an extensive structure for that also. So we have created avenues to learn, adopt, be it productivity tools of AI, and then also we are encouraging people to contribute, like bring use cases to the table using AI, and last but not the least, like showing the solution, be it to the customer or internal processes. So we are doing regular checks. We have these goals, AI goals, but we are holding space for doing regular checks and doing AI storyboarding with every businesses. So in that storyboarding, we are emphasizing it is all about using technology for a business outcome.
Nilanjana, would you want to add?
No, I think just a beautiful turn of phrase popped up in my mind in terms of keep talking about AI, and then for me it's about any technology, AI, blockchain, cloud, digital, whatever. I think it's about, can it generate insightful awareness, for decisioning, to your point, Otherwise it's a bunch of code at the end of it. If you can use it for an outcome to either engage, collaborate, iterate, innovate, it's purposeful. Any tool, it's a tool at the end of the day. I think if it can generate, and I'm turning that into insightful awareness, it's useful. Otherwise, junk it.
Great. So the takeaways that we have from the panel is that we first need to build processes and our culture. So what is it that you're going to deploy through technology is the first thing. Then we build a culture of learning. I have once I've done technology deployment in one of my organizations, doing it in the current, and I always try to tell everyone that it is like Lego blocks. They give you, these days the SaaS platforms are like Lego blocks. If you have your processes in place, they're beautiful. You can build it. If you know what you're going to build, you can build beautiful buildings. But if not, then yes, it can be a mess. So the first thing is build the process first, build the culture first, that what are we going to deploy through technology. Another beautiful thing that I heard was take the permission to ask. So if I am, of course, everyone is listening, but once you listen with permission, once you record with permission, that becomes a beautiful thing, and you're using the data to build something that will help them. Great. I'm taking this takeaway, whom can I ask this question from? And if you have that in the list, it builds a great, we were talking about collaboration in one of the panels, how beautiful the collaboration would be that I can reach out to this person. So as we move through technology, we have spoken about multiple types of projects. We've talked about technology deployment. Another thing that we keep hearing about is experiential learning. How do we enable experiential learning? How do we design projects that could help people build and implement those things? So Amit, do you want to take that?
See, at an adult learning level, majority of the learning has to happen through the experiential means. Otherwise, whatever we kind of, learn through any audio, video, or any even a classroom session, it just gets dissipated over a period of time. So this 70-20-10 principle I still very hold dear to myself, that you have 70% of your learning has to come from experiential, and that's how the adult learning will really work. The key piece is that I'll just share an example which we have been doing in our organizations, current as well as the previous ones, is to really put people on the assignments where they really need to pick up new skills. You put them in those kind of groups, put them into those kind of projects, and let them figure it out what's to be done. Have a proper environment around it in terms of their evaluations, their assessments, their presentations, that what are they learning around it, how have they progressed around it. In achieving that organizational goal, they will automatically start learning, and this will actually start building the organizational context around that. So to me, the best way is put people together in a group, give them a task which will make them learn those kind of skills which are required, and in the pursuit of achieving the larger goal, the learning which will automatically happen, because that's the way the learning is best retained. When they go through that ups and downs around how to make things happen, when they go through that turmoil within themselves, sometimes there will be frustration, sometimes there will be ecstasy, all of that, but that finally remains with them in terms of the learning as such. Otherwise, no matter what kind of concepts we tell them, it will all kind of fade away over a period of time. Let people just undergo that process and undergo that emotions of both success as well as failure, and that's what makes them really learn.
So we have, what we understand is that we know what we want to assess, we put that into the project, and then we give them the environment to actually implement and learn and evaluate. I see we are running out of time, so any closing remarks from the panel, all of you? Roopashri, do you want to?
So, just building on what he said, right? Like, learn by doing is very key for us, and especially for leaders, we put them in the front for everything. Like, be it, like for a very long time, we were not even having external facilitators to run our learning programs. So we were leveraging leaders as teachers. We, of course, would train them, but they are running the sessions for us. So leaders as teachers, leaders as coaches is something very big at Broadridge.
Closing comment on this topic, I would say, don't give people solutions. Let them explore it, and you will find that way, apart from coming up with creative solutions, they will also learn. So we have a tendency as leaders to quickly, somebody comes to us with a problem, okay, you do this, hold yourself, let people explore it, you will find the learning automatically happening.
I think I'll also add that, yeah, while large organizations are more or less doing it, it is in the startups and in the smaller organizations where the tolerance for or the ability to tolerate failures is much lesser, and not for the reason of intent, but because their ability to absorb shocks is that much limited. So it is important, yes, for me, learning always happens best on the job, like has been pointed out. Build tolerance for failures, but please don't let the people fall. So build a mechanism of review so that they understand that, yes, this organization is here to let me learn by doing, and I have something to fall back on. It's not that I am all on my own and all at sea.
So I guess that's where the role-based thing comes in handy, where whatever, we've had this thing for quite some time, that once you enter a position, you stay there forever. It's just a vertical growth. You really need to think out of that box and get into that phase that you're in this role, you're going to perform for these parameters for this time, and after that, refresh, rejuvenate, try some new learning, show your learning agility, and then get into something else. That might be a handy thing for the transformation piece.
Great. Chhavi?
I don't have any magic mantra, to be honest, but I think every opportunity of learning or talent or leadership I've approached is with a simple thing: whose need am I serving in this? Whether it's the business, the customer, the ecosystem, or the talent, the designs will come.
Great. So just to sum it up, so the things that we discussed and what we are taking away here is, one, we already know the why. Why are we developing a leadership pipeline? So we need to understand the what. What are we assessing potential for? What are we developing for? What is our context? And just identifying our context. What is our context? So who are we solving for? And then, of course, building our process, building our culture, and then deploying technology to enable us to work faster, work better, be more person-specific, give personalized recommendations. That's it from us. Thank you so much for the panel. Do we have time for one question? Thank you. Thank you, all of you. Thank you to the panel, and thank you, all of you, for being such an interesting audience.